So the topic we wanted to speak about today, very generally, is to try and depict a certain approach to what we'd consider to be mental balance, like mental equilibrium, which is a very fondled around phrase that's used very often, and how a person captivates, how he sees this concept of mental balance, balancing himself, or why Bichlad does mentality need balancing, as we'll see, can be very fundamental to his approach to how he works with himself, how he improves himself, how he works on his mentality. Now, unlike our previous webinar, this is not the first or one of the classes of the course, but this is definitely something that's cycling around that topic, and will give us a certain angle on the approach of Kabbalah and Chasidut, how Judaism approaches or conceives of the entire concept of mental balance. So the way we'll depict it, I mean, the topic we're actually talking about, if we said this in phrases of Kabbalah, is the topic of the chaotic worlds. So again, like we do in these classes, we're stripping it of semantics and phrases. So we're not going to go into teaching it with the concepts in the background, in the phrases of Kabbalah. But if you have background, then it might help to try and make the connection of how we're describing these psychological phenomena and how they connect or reflect what's described in great length in Kabbalah and Chasidut as the shattering of the vessels of the chaotic worlds that preceded our world. So that sounds very pyrotechnical, very enthusiastic. It is an intriguing topic, but that's the background of what we're discussing. But if we want to phrase it in simple terms, what we're actually discussing is a process of growth. How a person grows through life, the process we go through over a time span in our lives. So like previous worlds and future worlds, our own personal worlds, where we start from and where we're going to. So we know that biologically, where we start from, where we're going to, is not always a positive process. I mean, there's a process of deterioration. There's an entropic process in everything in creation. So in a sense, everyone is dying from the day that they're born. We're deteriorating. We're falling apart. And we also know that in Jewish perspective, and in our faith, in the epitome of our faith, and this is definitely something that's always very relevant. So life isn't something finite. Life is eternal. And the finitude of creation, I mean, now we're also starting the Torah anew. We're in Parashat Bereshit. No better time to start a study, to start a topic, to start a new world, to create a new world. Bezrat Hashem. So we're reading Bereshit. We just finished on yesterday in the synagogues and the shul to learn about the creation of the world. Now we're in Parashat Noach. So we're in the new beginning. Now there we read that initially man was supposed to live eternally. And it's the fundamental of our faith that once we rectify whatever needs rectification, so we'll return to an eternal existence. And the entropic nature of things, that everything disintegrates, and also in life people die, that's something that will come to an end. It's not inherent to creation. Now this biological phenomena is also very true psychologically. That there's something in our current state that our psychological approach is entropic. We go through entropic processes in our lives. We even encourage them in a sense. And if we learn to rectify our approach to balancing ourselves, then what we're actually looking to do is to overcome that entropy. And in a sense, again, enhance the eternity of our existence. So first we'll try to depict the simple image, like the psychological experiential image of our entropic process, our psychological process of life. So the simplest way to see this is just the difference between childhood and what the world calls maturity, which is usually just old age. And so a child typically is full of energy, full of light, full of aspirations. Also full of depth. I mean, not only high aspirations, a child also has like tantrums and lows, depressions. You know, a child's personality, or our juvenile personality, is typically has very strong extremes, peaks. We peak very high. Like we have high aspirations. Maybe a 9-year-old can dream to be anything between a cowboy and an astronaut and a Chabad shliach in Alaska, and all of it together. And the older you grow, you see how all of these we kind of zero in. Our personality kind of irons out into a very, very small area. So if I'm 90, if you change the type of coffee I drink in the morning, I might have a heart attack. When I was 9, I could be anything between a cowboy and an astronaut. In one day, I can go from peak to peak. Also in highs and lows. Like again, the experience of life is full of highs and lows. One day I can wake up in the morning and find myself extremely motivated, full of light. Today I'm going to do something great. I'm going to bring Mashiach. Maybe even I'll be Mashiach today. And you can feel this sensation. So one day you wake up with a sensation of being full of light. And the next day, or maybe even the next 10 minutes later, you could wake up with the feeling that if I get out of bed, it would be a miracle. Now that's a healthy person. That's not manic depression. You don't need to go to the doctor. That's just normal. So these sorts of mood swings, like radical mood swings, are typical to humanity, to all of us. We all have peaks, very high highs, and also very low lows. And the more we go through life, as we'll try to explain why this happens, but those peaks get ironed down. We like to sarcastically compare this to the hospital monitors. We've said that many times before. It's like you start off pretty good and your heartbeat's going up and down, but slowly but surely over time you flatline. So you get 80, 90 years, 120 years, and there's an entropic process of disintegration. And you start off with high peaks, but slowly over your process of life, psychologically, you develop a sort of cynicism and whatever. When I was your age, I also thought we'd conquer the world and bring light and light over darkness. I've learned to be realistic and to wake up from those messianic dreams. Again, all those extremist words today are derogatory. Messianism, you know, dream too high. It's for children. And so that sort of approach, like cynical, like what the world calls maturity, but really all it is just growing old. It's just dwindling away. And there's, again, ironing your personality into very, very small borderlines. That is, in a sense, the natural process of life. Now, how does this happen? Where does the snowball effect start? Why is it that we start off with very large edges, very large peaks, and slowly but surely we start compromising them and zeroing into a very small personality until we just flatline? I mean, this is the process of dying psychologically. It's also the process, also biologically, something very similar is happening. But we're just going to try and focus on how experientially how this feels, and to try and see and depict what's happening in our mindset, like in the background, in our like semi-conscious approach to life, that's igniting this snowball effect. So again, what happens is that because a person is going between peak and peak, like you said, I wake up one morning and I find myself full of light. I'm going to bring Mashiach. Now, how do I react to that image of self, to that identity? So, because I don't give a lot of thought to life, I don't have, like we said this in our previous webinar, and I guess it's part of what's looming over everything we're trying to teach here, is that there's what to learn, how to live. That's our title here, learning to live. So because we don't really give much thought to life, and we just kind of roll with the punches, so naturally, spontaneously, every situation we find ourselves in, or every identity we find ourselves in, like I wake up in the morning with this lit up identity, so I immediately identify with it. Like I buy into the narrative, into the story. This is who I am. I'm an illuminated person. I feel this way. I feel this experience. I find myself waking up that way, and I identify with it immediately. Now, again, later on that day or the next morning, I wake up and I'm the exact opposite person. Suddenly I feel empty and anguished and so heavy if I just could get out of bed. And again, immediately, unconsciously, I don't think about this, but naturally I identify with it. Now, this is who I am. I'm a depressed, empty guy. Now, because every time I I experience a peak or experience an edge of my personality, I spontaneously identify with it. I don't think about it too much. So I keep finding myself surprised. Like every stage of identification, every new image of self that I acquire shatters my previous identity. Like if you kind of get a gentle feel of what's happening to me. So like that example I just said now, I woke up in the morning, I felt very good, felt very, took it for granted. This is who I am. I'm a Labor guy. I'm full of life. I'm full of light. The next morning I felt the opposite. I also took it as is. In the background of that re-identification, now as being a depressed guy, there's a shattering of the previous self, like a sense of waking up, as if I was cheating myself. A second ago I thought I was a very Labor guy, but no, that must have been a dream. Must have been like a false aspiration, a false self. There's a sense of like I was kidding myself. I feel like yesterday was a delusion. And again, the next day I wake up and again I'm full of light, or a different peak. So my previous sensation of being very low, I also feel in the back of my mind that was a delusion. Every time I go through from peak to peak, because I immediately identify with the place I've reached, so I lose my previous identity. I get this sensation of, in Hebrew you say pikachon. Pikachon is like waking up from a dream. You're like, oh, I was completely mixed up. Now I'm enlightened. Now I understand the truth. And I feel that everything preceding it I was just cheating myself. So when I'm down, I feel that the highs were cheated, weren't real. And when I'm high, I feel that the down was cheated. Every time I experience a certain peak of my personality, I identify with it. And I wake up or find myself feeling that my previous identity was a lie. So my previous image of self shatters every time I go from peak to peak. Now there's a certain, it's scarring, like there's a certain painfulness to that experience of waking up from a delusion, of being delusioned. Like that background experience that yesterday I was delusioned, it scars me. There's a painfulness, like a feeling that I was being cheated. I was cheating myself. I wasn't in a true place. There's an unpleasantness to it, to that process in the background of re-identifying with my experience. So when I'm in a high and I reassess yesterday's low, then I feel like I was cheating myself. I don't like feeling that way. And then when I'm low and I feel that my high was I was cheating myself, I don't like feeling that way either. So going from peak to peak involves a breaking. Every time I need to lose my previous identity, and that loss of identity, that shattering of my assumed self, it's unpleasant. It scars me. And it ignites psychologically an impulse to keep away from edges. I start developing an intuitive instinct not to go too high and not to sink too low. Don't soar too high, don't sink too low. Compromise. It causes a psychological tendency to compromise edges. Because every time I'm high, I start anticipating waking up from it. It's not real. I don't believe it. I don't buy into it anymore. And when I'm low, also, I don't get a little upset. There's not that much to be depressed about because my expectations should have been so high anyway. I start developing a compromising notion about life. And slowly but surely, like a snowball effect, like we said, I flatline. I zero into the middle. Now, this process, this mental process, we're depicting it in broad outlines, but it's very typical. And in a sense, it's even worded out. Like if you go to a therapist, then there's a practice to do this to a person. We don't have to take professional therapeutic approaches. If you just contemplate on your intuitive instincts in life, like if you meet someone who's very excited, he's full of light, then your intuitive instinct is to calm him down. That's what you feel you need to do. You walk into a room, someone's like your kid is very, very excited, so you feel like this urgency to calm him down. And if he's very depressed, then you feel an urgency or an intuitive instinct to cheer him up. And our aspiration, also the psychological approaches that turn this into a professional practice, they're just elaborating on human instinct, on our first nature. So we don't really need to go into that so much. We can just contemplate on our own intuitive instincts of how we react to ourselves and how we react to others. If I see someone high, then I want to lower him down. If I see someone low, I want to raise him up. Just for conversation, if you read in Hasidic texts, like in Tanya, for instance, so the Alter Rebbe there, he does the exact opposite. When you're high, he stretches you up, and when you're low, in a sense, this might be hard to comprehend, but he steps on you, he lowers you lower. So that needs explaining. We're not going to explain that now, but this intuitive instinct is part of our assumed entropic approach to life. And that everything's kind of going down the drain slowly but surely, and we're all dying from the day we were born. And life's experience, it causes us to enter this snowball effect. Like, because again, yesterday I thought I was a Mashiach, and I realized that was a delusion. So tomorrow I won't let myself think that much. And same thing on the lows of life. Also, I won't let myself be exposed to the deepest anguish of existence. I don't want to experience my lows that deep either. So I compromise my personality. And again, you could call this therapy, right? If you take it to medication. So today it's full of you. If you're too high, then there's a pill that'll help you go down a bit. And if you're too low, then there's a pill that'll help you lift you up a bit. And we can just, again, zero. So obviously the psychiatric image is already somewhat radical. Anything you take into clinical proportions becomes more radical. But this is just normal life, each and every one of us. Okay, so how do we fix this? How do we stop this loop? Because we do have peaks, and the process of ping-ponging from peak to peak, like we said in the beginning, involves a certain breaking each time. And each time I lose my image of self, my stability, who I thought I was. And that in turn ignites an intuition of keeping away from peaks. So then I find myself zeroing in. So how do I stop this snowball effect? What is it that I need to do in order to first, again, stop the deterioration process, and maybe even, as we'll explain, do the opposite? And maybe mental balance not only is not compromising peaks, maybe we want to enhance peaks. Well, we do, not maybe. True mental balance, not only does it not compromise you into a safe place, which again, that safe place is just closing on you, because the safest place is your grave. That's the safest place, and that's where a safe place is going. So if you allow your personality to continue this entropic process, which obviously we're all doing, because as of today, since we ate from that tree we shouldn't have eaten from, we're all dying. We're all in this entropic process. So also as a collective humanity, also reality. I mean, even also a plastic cup is going through a certain entropic process today. Everything in reality. And that's what happened in the tree of knowledge, that this aspect entered life, the aspect of death, of deterioration, and also psychologically. So there's something we're doing wrong. And the process of bringing Mashiach, of redemption, involves solving this mental issue, or this biological issue, or this on all elements of life. But now we're talking about it in our psychological experience. So what is it that we need to do in order to also halt the process and, in a sense, turn it over, like ignite eternal life and stretch our peaks? Really what we want to do is enable a person to first maintain his peaks, like learn how to carry and be able to not compromise all his peaks. And afterwards, we even, in a sense, want to stretch them and enlarge those peaks. So that we'll need to get to later on. I mean, we're not going to talk about all this today, but just to give a general picture of what we'd consider balance. So today, when you say mental balance, in a sense, what you're talking about is a compromised enough personality to hold a job from 9 to 5. That's what mental, like the FDA. If you read the FDA's depiction of a person who's mentally healthy, is someone who his personality is balanced, meaning compromised enough to hold a 9 to 5 in society and not make too much trouble for the system, like fit into the flow of life, and from there deteriorate to where he needs to deteriorate. So again, it works in a sense, but it's not solving anything, and it's also not mentally healthy. Now, what Kabbalah and Chasidut is guiding you to do, in a sense, is the exact opposite. Not only not to compromise your edges, but to learn to contain them so you don't need to compromise them, and afterwards even enhance them. Now, maybe in brackets we'll say that it's not always a bad thing to compromise edges. Like if your son just bumped his elbow and he's crying and you say calm down, that's not always the wrong thing to say. Don't take me in too much of a simplistic approach. Like just like in life, sometimes edges need to be compromised so that they can be containable and then enhanced. Like I guess like in a clinical setting. So it could very well be that there are situations where a person does need medication in order to bring him to a point where discussion can help. Like if there's no one to talk to, it's completely manic, then sometimes medication is a necessity, like a Band-Aid or an Acamol, just so that there will be an ability to start a process. So that's like the period of creation that we're all experiencing now. These 5,784 years that we've been through are like a go-between period of calming or reaching a proportion that will be obtainable, like capacitable. We can capacitate it so that we can start an opposite process of re-expanding our edges. So also on a personal level, that's true. It's not always a bad thing to compromise edges as a in-between step to stop a bad process and start a good process. So I just wanted to say that so that I'm not misunderstood, that it's always wrong to calm down someone who's high or to cheer up someone who's low. It can be a very good thing. But as a system, as a method, if that's the entire method, then what you're actually doing to a person is that you're slowly but surely you're compromising his personality. So if the entire method is just to lower a person's highs and cheer up his lows, then you're killing him slowly. So it's not a solution. It could be an in-between step in order to enable a solvable situation that can be contained and reassessed. Okay, so again, in 2 words, what is it that we're looking to do? So what we need to do, in the words of Chasidut, of Kabbalah, is we need to reassess the center point. That's called the Beinoni in Tanya. In the words of Chasidut, the phrase is a very important phrase, and in Judaism is a Beinoni. Beinoni means like the intermediate or the middle center point of every system. If you want to balance an equilibrium, a spectrum, an array of peaks, then what you need to do is identify and pivot around a sturdy center. Now, what does that mean in our context? It means that we need to reassess our image of self. Like I need to learn how to develop an image of who I am that can contain within one explanation both my peaks and my lows. Like we started off, the snowball effect starts because every time I go from edge to edge, my high contradicts my image of self, my low, and my low contradicts my high. When I go from peak to peak, it involves a process of feeling that I was wrong about who I am. So what I need to do is I need to develop a picture of who I am that contains within it both edges, so that when I go high, I know how to explain to myself what's happening here as part of my conception of self. And also when I go low, I need to be able to also explain that edge, that low edge, as also as part of who I am. So when I go high, I think immediately that I must be a wholly enlightened person. This is who I am. And that counters my yesterday's experience or tomorrow when I'll feel very low. So I'll feel that's so not typical for me. I must not be who I thought I was. Then that causes the breaking, which in turn causes that intuitive tendency to compensate, to be afraid or to keep safe distance from edges. So what I need to do is I need also when I'm high to explain to myself, to be able to understand what is happening to me. now as part of my general understanding of self, which shouldn't surprise me, because I know how to explain what's happening now. It doesn't make me an enlightened messianic person. No, I know what this high means. And also when I'm low, I also need to be able to explain to myself where is that in my personality? How do I take my lows in a way that it doesn't surprise me at all? I need to be able to have a broad enough image of self that can explain all my peaks so that I can go from peak to peak without that feeling that I'm someone else than who I thought. Both peaks need to make sense. That's called a Beinoni, a center point. Like if I can explain to myself who I am in a way that contains all the peaks of my personality, then I'll stabilize the system. Now from that point, the more I can broaden my understanding of self, I can start stretching my peaks. Not only do I not deteriorate, I should start enhancing. So again, in so many words, we're just saying a very general concept that this process starts from a misconception of self. And the misconception of self is more than it's a wrong understanding, it's just a lack of understanding. I don't really understand what's going on in life. I don't understand myself. I never thought about it, never learned how to live. So I just spontaneously identify with my experiences. When I'm high, I automatically identify with my high. And that involves, again, waking up from my delusional low. That's how I feel. And then when I'm low, again, I wake up from my delusional high. So I never actually take the time to build a center point that contains my peaks. And then life is really manic-depressive. You go from your ping pong, and that ping pong is compromising slowly but surely. You're flatlining. What you need to do is take the time or the effort to build a constellation that explains all of your peaks. And this is also where my brackets come in, that it could be that it's not doable when you're 9 years old. Maybe you need to go through some trauma. You need to compromise a little bit from being a cowboy and an astronaut and a Chabad shliach and also in a tantrum altogether. So it could be that you need a little bit of compromising to reach a proportional personality that is containable, could be. But once you reach that point, the earlier the better, you need to build an image of self that explains all of your peaks as part of one personality. When you're high, you don't imagine you're a tzaddik, and when you're low, you don't think you're a rasha. You're a beinoni. These are the phrases of Chasidut and Kabbalah that we don't want to explain now, but just to throw those words in. And once you build that image of self, then first of all, you can maintain where you are, and then slowly but surely, you want to enhance your edges. First, you want to recuperate everything you've lost in the initial process of deterioration. And later on, you even want to enhance more than that. You want to reach chaotic heights, all the way back to primordial man, to Adam and Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, even more, to what we're anticipating very, very soon, our messianic age, messianic awareness that will contain completely chaotic lights in very broad vessels, both peaks, both edges. And in order to do that, we need to go through the middle process of maintaining ourselves in one image and then stretching it. Okay, so what we've said today is something very, very general, very broad, and I hope people who have a little bit of background, maybe that's something that touched some concepts that you're familiar with, and if you don't, then I hope it gave a little bit of clarity of how we would want to depict this term that's very often used today of mental balance or mental stability, mental equilibrium, that very often it's misused as like the concept of maturity, which is very often misused as a compromised, cynical, like growing old, entropic process. So we definitely don't want to grow up that way. That's not growing up, that's just growing old. We want to grow up. The term in Chassidut is gadlut. We want to achieve largeness, again, broadness. So a process of growing should be broadening you. And growing old just narrows you, makes you more narrow until you just flatline. So that's what humanity is going through. And we definitely do not want to compromise our aspirations, our messianic aspirations. We love that word. We're very messianic people. So we definitely want to enhance our aspirations, our peaks. And in order to do that, we first need to learn how to maintain our peaks and slowly but surely, but enhance them as well. Bezrat Hashem. So that's we'll bless everybody that way, also as individuals and also as a people. So again, we can't go without saying something to connect this to the situation. I mean, the Jewish people are also individuals, but all of us as a collective people are a collective consciousness of one being, one body. So also as a people, we've been taking so many blows. Like what's the worst symptom of the rounds that we've been going through? Like in Gaza now with these wars, so many years, the people leading us or misleading us have been captivated in a lack of ability to be victorious, to finish it once and for all. So they consciously entered a cycle of rounds. Like every couple of years, we take a few blows and then we give a few blows. You know, what happens when you enter such a status quo, such a entropic process, is that slowly but surely you lose aspiration. You lose your sensitivity, you lose your peaks, you lose your faith in yourself, and you're flatlining. And if a Kadosh Baruch Hu comes around to rattle your cage, it's because he wants Tchias HaMesim, he wants to wake you up, not to compromise your aspirations, your identity, your shlichut, your calling in life as an individual and as a people. And that's what we need to recuperate here. We need to recuperate our peaks. What is it that Hashem wants from us? And so we need to go from defense to offense, not just in a military manner. The military manner is a problem. We want to do everything peacefully. But because we weren't willing to do it strongly enough and to say out our calling, that evil is a bad thing. We don't want peace with evil. We want to eradicate evil. Chas v'shalom. It's our shlichut. It's our calling. What Hashem wants from us is to fight evil, so that there'll be no evil. And if we don't do that, the evil will spread into us and into the whole world. Chas v'shalom. So the whole world is at stake here. All of humanity to be swept into evil or to be swept away by good. And it's not we don't have the privilege. It's not a privilege, but we're not allowed to make peace or to compromise with evil. And we need to re-achieve that awareness and be willing to, b'mesiras nefesh, go towards our calling to eradicate evil on our way to spreading good and light in the world. And if we're willing to do this, then certainly 100% Hashem will be by our side, and therefore will also happen peacefully. We won't need to fight if we have a willingness. Enough of it, we're still stuttering. We're stuttering because, again, we've been through so many rounds that we've compromised and we've lost the ability to aspire as a people. Now, we haven't lost it, obviously, completely, chas v'shalom. We're not flatlined, but we've deteriorated. Now we need to catch ourselves and change the snowball and regrow our wings as a people. Bezrat Hashem. So that's the blessing we have for all of us as individuals and to the entire people in the situation we're at today, that Bezrat Hashem, with all of the harshness of what we've gone through, that this be the turning point where we regrow our peaks and turn back to the world to lead it towards a more lit place, which is our calling in existence. Bezrat Hashem.